The Republic was old, and the men were young. Rome was full of law and full of ambition. Tonight we walk through dust and ashes, through names written in blood and stone, through the slow collapse of order. Close your eyes and drift back to a time when the world's greatest power began to devour itself, when senators drew daggers in marble halls, when legions marched not against barbarians, but against Rome herself. The year is 91 BCE. The Mediterranean belongs to Rome, stretching from the mists of Britain to the burning sands of Egypt. Yet within this empire, cracks are spreading like fault lines through marble. The city that conquered the world cannot conquer its own contradictions. The republic that brought law to nations cannot bring peace to its own citizens. And in this moment of supreme triumph, the seeds of destruction are already taking root. Listen to the wind through the 7 hills. Hear the distant murmur of the Forum, where orators speak of glory while plotting murder. Smell the incense from 1,000 temples, where gods grow deaf to the prayers of a people who have forgotten the difference between honor and ambition. This is Rome in her twilight hour, though none yet know that darkness comes. The story begins not with betrayal, but with a question. Who deserves to be Roman? It is a simple question that will drown the world in blood. In the hills of central Italy, where olive groves stretch toward purple mountains and ancient towns cling to rocky heights, live the Socii, the allies. For 3 centuries they have fought beside Roman legions. Their sons have died on foreign battlefields. Their gold has filled Roman treasuries. Their grain has fed Roman citizens. Yet they remain strangers in the empire they helped build, subjects without citizenship, allies without equality. The Marsi speak first. They are a proud people, mountain folk who have never bowed to any foreign yoke save Rome's. Their chieftains gather in sacred groves where their fathers once offered sacrifice to gods whose names Romans have forgotten. The message they send to Rome is simple. Grant us citizenship or lose us forever. It is not a request. It is a warning. But Rome in her pride cannot hear warnings. The Senate, wrapped in togas stained with purple pride, debates endlessly in their marble halls. Some speak of justice, of rewarding faithful service. Others speak of tradition, of keeping Roman blood pure. Most speak of nothing at all, for they have grown fat on conquest and lazy on tribute. They cannot imagine that their allies might possess anything so dangerous as dignity. Into this poisoned atmosphere steps a man whose name will echo through the corridors of history like distant thunder. Gaius Marius, 6 times consul, the 3rd founder of Rome. Some whisper. Others call him the Republic's executioner. Both are right. Marius is old now, his face carved by campaigns in distant lands, his hands scarred by swords and stylus alike. He has seen Rome's legions break barbarian hordes. He has watched enemies flee at the mere whisper of his approach. But the victories that built his legend have also built his obsession. He cannot bear to be forgotten. He cannot accept that younger men might claim the glory he considers his birthright. The Allies' demands reach Rome as autumn leaves begin to fall. In the Forum, speakers take their turns on the rostra, that ancient platform decorated with the bronze beaks of enemy ships. Marcus Livius Drusus, a tribune whose lineage runs back to the Republic's founding, speaks with passion of justice delayed. His voice carries across the Forum like distant thunder, promising citizenship to those who have earned it with blood. They have stood with us in our darkest hours, Drusus declares, his words echoing off marble columns. When Hannibal's elephants darkened Italian skies, who stood beside our legions? When Jugurtha's gold corrupted our nobles, who remained loyal? When the Cimbri and Teutons threatened to sweep our civilization into the sea, who helped us turn the tide? These allies have proven their worth. Rome's honor demands we recognize it. But honor is a luxury the Republic can no longer afford. In the shadows of the Curia, senators whisper of practical concerns. Citizenship means voting rights. Voting rights mean political power. Political power means the end of their comfortable dominance. The old families who trace their bloodlines back to Romulus and Remus cannot bear the thought of sharing their birthright with mountain shepherds and hill farmers. As winter deepens and debates rage, something darker stirs in the Italian countryside. The allies have heard Rome's silence, and in that silence, they hear their answer. If Rome will not grant them citizenship willingly, perhaps it is time to show Rome what it means to lose their loyalty. Marius watches from his villa on the outskirts of Rome, where gardens stretch toward the Alban hills and slaves tend to vineyards that produce wine fit for gods. He is no longer consul, but power flows to him still, drawn by the magnetism of old glory. Veterans seek him out, men whose scars bear witness to shared campaigns. Young officers come calling, ambitious souls who know that in Rome, advancement comes through patronage, and no patron's name opens more doors than that of Gaius Marius. The general study overlooks the city he has served so long. Scrolls cover every surface. Maps of distant lands, casualty reports from forgotten battles, letters from clients and allies scattered across the Mediterranean world. But increasingly, his attention turns to documents closer to home. Intelligence reports from his network of freedmen and slaves speak of midnight meetings in Italian hill towns, of weapons being cached in temple cellars, of young men disappearing from their fields to gather in hidden camps. Marius knows what these signs mean. He has seen rebellion brewing in Africa, watched insurrection take root in Gaul. But this is different. This rebellion grows not in foreign soil, but in the very heart of Rome's empire. These are not barbarian raiders seeking plunder, but civilized peoples demanding recognition. They know Roman military tactics because they helped develop them. They understand Roman weaknesses because they have stood beside Roman legions in battle. Word reaches Rome on a gray morning in 91 BCE that changes everything. Asculum, a prosperous town in the Picenum, has risen in revolt. The Roman praetor Servilius and his entire delegation lie dead in the town's forum, their bodies displaying the terrible evidence of popular fury. The message carved into the praetor's bloodied toga is simple: death to Rome. The news spreads through the city like wildfire. In the forum, crowds gather to hear the latest reports. Some speak of outrage, of teaching rebellious allies the price of ingratitude. Others whisper of fear, wondering how many more towns might follow Asculum's example. The slaves who carry water through the streets speak in hushed tones of masters who no longer sleep soundly, of weapons being sharpened in patrician households, of senators who jump at shadows. But it is not merely Asculum. Throughout central and southern Italy, the standards of revolt are rising. The Marsi, those fierce mountain warriors, declare their independence under their war chief Quintus Poppaedius Silo. The Samnites, Rome's ancient enemies who have nursed their resentment through generations of submission, see their chance for revenge. The Lucanians in the south remember their Greek heritage and dream of freedom. Even some Latin towns, Rome's oldest allies, begin to waver in their loyalty. The rebels are not content with mere defiance. They understand that to succeed, they must become what Rome refuses to let them be: a legitimate state. In the mountain town of Corfinium, they establish their capital, renaming it Italica in honor of their cause. Here they mint coins bearing images of the Italian bull goring the Roman wolf, symbols that speak louder than any manifesto of their determination to overturn the established order. Their government mirrors Rome's own, with consuls and praetors elected from among their leading men. But unlike Rome, their citizenship extends to all free men who take up arms for the cause, regardless of birth or lineage. It is a vision of inclusion that exposes the hollowness of Roman claims to represent civilization and justice. Marius feels the weight of years settling on his shoulders like a winter cloak. His body bears the accumulated damage of countless campaigns: a leg that never healed properly from a wound in Africa, fingers stiffened by Germanic cold, lungs that still catch from smoke inhaled in burning Gallic villages. But his mind remains sharp, and that mind recognizes opportunity in crisis. The general's morning ritual never varies. He rises before dawn, as soldiers learn to do, and walks through his gardens while reading dispatches from across the empire. His freedman secretary, a Syrian Greek whose quick wit earned his freedom after 10 years of faithful service, follows at a respectful distance, ready to take dictation or offer counsel when requested. This morning brings troubling news from multiple fronts. The rebels have won their first significant victory, destroying a Roman force near Grimentum with tactics that demonstrate sophisticated military knowledge. More ominously, they have begun coordinating their efforts, with Marsic forces linking up with Samnite contingents and Lucanian raiders to present a unified threat. They fight like Romans, Marius observes to his secretary, studying a map marked with red symbols indicating rebel positions. They should. We trained them. The irony is not lost on him. For decades, Roman policy has relied on allied contingents to supplement the legions. Italian warriors have learned Roman discipline, Roman tactics, Roman military engineering. Now they turn this knowledge against their former masters with devastating effect. In the Senate House, emergency sessions run long into the night. The conscript fathers, those august representatives of Roman tradition, struggle to comprehend how their empire of laws and treaties has suddenly transformed into a war zone. Some call for massive military mobilization, for levying every available man and crushing the rebellion with overwhelming force. Others counsel negotiation, suggesting that granting limited concessions might split the rebel coalition. The debates grow heated as news of fresh disasters arrives daily. A Roman force under Rutilius Lupus meets annihilation in the Marsic Hills, the survivors bringing tales of enemies who seem to anticipate every Roman stratagem. Another army under Publius Crassus suffers catastrophic defeat near Asculum, with Crassus himself falling in the retreat, his body pierced by Italian spears. These are not victories won through barbarian fury or superior numbers. The rebels demonstrate tactical sophistication that matches anything Roman commanders can devise. They coordinate attacks across multiple fronts. They employ deception and intelligence gathering. They understand the importance of logistics and maintain supply lines that keep their armies fed and equipped through long campaigns. More troubling still, they begin to receive support from unexpected quarters. King Mithridates of Pontus, that perpetual thorn in Rome's eastern flank, sends gold and weapons to the rebels. Gallic tribes, still smarting from recent Roman conquests, offer mercenaries and military advisors. Even some Egyptian merchants, grown wealthy on Mediterranean trade, quietly fund rebel activities in hopes of weakening Roman control over commercial routes. Marius watches these developments with the eye of a veteran strategist. He understands that Rome faces not merely a rebellion, but a test of the imperial system itself. If the allies succeed in wringing citizenship from Roman hands through force, every subject people in the empire will learn the lesson. From Spain to Syria, from Britain to Africa, the message will spread. Rome can be beaten. Rome can be forced to negotiate. Rome is no longer invincible. The general's villa becomes an unofficial command center as old comrades and former subordinates seek his counsel. They come in the evening hours, when shadows stretch long across the 7 hills and the city settles into uneasy rest. Centurions who served under him in Africa share wine and memories while discussing the military challenges posed by the rebellion. Tribunes who cut their teeth in his Germanic campaigns compare notes on rebel tactics and wonder how best to counter Italian knowledge of Roman methods. These conversations, conducted in the flickering light of oil lamps and the soft glow of braziers, reveal the true complexity of Rome's situation. The rebels are not simply insurgents to be crushed. They are Rome's own children, taught Roman ways, trained in Roman methods, shaped by Roman values. They know how Roman armies march, how Roman camps are fortified, how Roman supplies are organized and protected. But they also know Roman weaknesses. They understand that Roman military success depends on discipline, on the ability to maintain formation under pressure and follow orders without question. They have learned that Roman soldiers, for all their training and equipment, struggle when faced with unexpected tactics or unfamiliar enemies. Most dangerously, they know that Roman confidence can be shattered by unexpected reverses, that the legendary morale of the legions depends partly on the myth of Roman invincibility. As autumn turns to winter, the war enters a new phase. The rebels, emboldened by their early successes, begin to expand their operations. Marsic raiders strike at Roman supply lines, disappearing into mountain caves before pursuit can organize. Samnite forces lay siege to Roman strongholds in Campania, demonstrating their mastery of siege techniques learned during decades of service alongside Roman armies. In the south, Lucanian and Bruttian confederates threaten the Greek cities that remain loyal to Rome, forcing the deployment of precious legions to protect ancient allies. The financial cost of the war begins to strain even Rome's vast resources. The treasury, swollen by decades of successful conquest, sees its gold reserves steadily depleted by the need to maintain multiple armies in the field simultaneously. The cost of feeding, equipping, and paying soldiers engaged in active campaigning far exceeds normal military expenditures. Moreover, the rebellion disrupts the very territories that normally contribute most heavily to Roman revenues. Italian agriculture, the foundation of Roman prosperity, suffers catastrophic disruption as armies march across fertile valleys and peasants flee burning villages. The harvest of 90 BCE yields barely half the normal crop, not because of weather or disease, but because farmers have exchanged plows for swords. Olive groves that have produced oil for generations lie trampled beneath the feet of marching soldiers. Vineyards that once supplied wine for Roman tables burn in the wake of retreating armies. The disruption extends beyond agriculture to the complex web of commercial relationships that bind the empire together. Italian merchants, caught between conflicting loyalties, find their trading networks severed by military operations. Craftsmen who once supplied goods to Roman markets flee their workshops as armies approach. The production of weapons, pottery, textiles, and luxury goods that normally flows from Italian workshops to Mediterranean markets slows to a trickle. Marius recognizes that Rome's response to the crisis will shape not only the outcome of the war, but the character of the Republic itself. If Rome crushes the rebellion through overwhelming force while refusing all compromise, it will rule an empire held together only by fear. But if Rome grants citizenship to rebels who win it through violence, it will establish a precedent that threatens the stability of the entire imperial system. The old general's thoughts turn increasingly to his own legacy. He has served Rome faithfully for more than 30 years, leading her armies to victory against barbarians and civilized enemies alike. His military reforms transformed Roman warfare, creating the professional legions that built the empire. His political career brought honor to his family and advancement to his clients. Yet as he watches the Republic tear itself apart, he wonders whether his life's work has meaning beyond personal glory. In the quiet hours before dawn, when sleep eludes him and the weight of years presses heavily on his aging frame, Marius walks the colonnades of his villa and remembers. He remembers the young soldier he once was, hungry for glory and confident that Roman virtue would triumph over any obstacle. He remembers the campaigns that built his reputation, the desperate fight against Jugurtha in the African desert, the terrible battles against Germanic tribes who seemed more beast than human, the moment when he stood victorious on fields littered with enemy dead and knew that his name would live forever. But he also remembers the cost of those victories. The Roman soldiers who died under his command, boys from Italian farms who followed his eagles to foreign graves. The villages burned in pursuit of strategic objectives. The prisoners sold into slavery to fund continued operations. The gradual erosion of the values that once made Rome great, replaced by the pragmatic brutality that empire demands. Now, as winter deepens and the social war enters its bloodiest phase, Marius must decide what role he will play in the final act of his career. He could retire gracefully, withdrawing to his estates and allowing younger men to grapple with the crisis. He could offer his services to the Senate, lending his experience and reputation to the war effort while remaining above factional politics. Or he could seize this moment of chaos to reclaim the power that he believes is rightfully his, using military success against the rebels as a stepping stone to renewed political dominance. The choice he makes will echo through the remaining years of the Republic, setting precedents that future generals will follow to their own advancement and Rome's ultimate destruction. For in this moment, as Allied armies ravage Italian countryside and Roman blood soaks Italian soil, the Republic begins its transformation from a state governed by law to an empire ruled by strongmen. The social war will end, as all wars must. The rebels will win their citizenship, though at a cost in blood that will haunt both sides for generations. Rome will survive this crisis, as she has survived so many others. But the Rome that emerges from the ashes of the social war will be fundamentally different from the Republic that entered it. More powerful perhaps, but less principled, more efficient but less free. and in that transformation lies the seed of everything that follows. The rise of Sulla, the march on Rome, the prescription lists that legalize murder, the slow collapse of law into chaos, the gradual replacement of citizens with subjects, the final death of republican virtue beneath the weight of imperial necessity. The Republic was old. The men were young. And Rome was full of law, until ambition made law meaningless, and the eagles that once brought civilization to the world turned their talons toward Rome herself. In the wind through the 7 hills, you can still hear their dying screams. But that is a story for another night, another chapter in the long twilight of the Roman Republic. For now, let the weight of history settle over you like a warm blanket, and dream of marble halls where giants once walked, where honor meant something more than victory, where the law was sacred and senators were more than politicians. Sleep, and remember Rome as she was before ambition consumed her. Sleep, and forget for a while that all republics die, that all empires fall, that all glory fades to dust. Tomorrow will bring new stories of power and corruption, of heroes and villains, of the long road from the social war to the final death of the republic beneath the wheels of imperial ambition. But tonight, let there be peace in the ruins of what once was great. Part 2. Sulla, the first dictator, 88 to 79 BCE. The year is 88 BCE. Rome stands victorious over her rebellious allies, but victory has come at a price that few yet understand. The social war is ending not with unconditional surrender, but with compromise, citizenship granted to those who demanded it, peace purchased with the very concessions that senators once declared unthinkable. The Republic has survived, but something essential has been lost in the transaction. The idea that Rome's will is absolute, that her word is law, that her authority springs from divine favor rather than mortal calculation. All of this lies buried beneath the pragmatic settlements that end the war. Into this moment of exhausted triumph steps a man whose name will become synonymous with the Republic's slow suicide. Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Patrician by birth, soldier by training, monster by choice. His story is one of ambition without limit, of power pursued beyond all moral constraint, of a brilliant mind corrupted by the discovery that in Rome, anything can be justified if it succeeds. Sulla's consulship begins with promise. He is a proven commander, having served with distinction in the social war and earned the grudging respect of both enemies and allies. His early victories against the Marsic Confederation demonstrated tactical skill that rivals even Marius's reputation. More importantly, he has shown himself capable of the kind of ruthless efficiency that modern Romans increasingly value over traditional virtues. But in the east, a shadow falls across Roman power. Mithridates VI of Pontus, that eternal enemy of Roman expansion, sees opportunity in Rome's distraction with Italian affairs. His armies sweep through Asia Minor like a plague, massacring Roman citizens and overturning treaties that have stood for generations. The massacre at Ephesus alone claims 80,000 Roman lives. Men, women, and children butchered in a single day by mobs drunk on anti-Roman hatred. The Senate's response is swift and decisive. Sulla, as consul, receives command of the Eastern armies and authorization to restore Roman authority in Asia. It is a plum assignment, promising both military glory and the kind of wealth that only successful conquest can provide. For a patrician whose family fortunes have declined, whose political advancement has been hampered by lack of funds, the Mithridatic command represents salvation. But Rome in her wisdom has created a system where no decision is final, where popular assemblies can overturn senatorial decrees, where ambitious politicians can challenge established authority through constitutional means. Marcus Livius Drusus is dead, murdered by unknown assassins who left no trace beyond a body cooling in a pool of blood. But his political legacy lives on in the person of his protege, a young tribune named Gaius Marius the Younger. No, not young Marius, but rather the tribune Publius Sulpicius Rufus, a man whose oratorical skills rival Cicero's and whose political ambitions know no bounds. Sulpicius understands that in the new Rome emerging from the social war, traditional authority means less than popular support. The Italian allies, newly enfranchised, represent a massive voting bloc that smart politicians can mobilize against the established order. Working in partnership with the aging Marius, who sees one final chance to reclaim the glory of his youth, Sulpicius proposes legislation that would transfer the Mithridatic command from Sulla to Marius. The justification is politically clever. Who better to face Mithridates than the general who saved Rome from Germanic invasion? Who more deserving of Eastern glory than the man who has served the Republic faithfully for 30 years? The proposal passes in the popular assembly with overwhelming support from newly enfranchised Italians who remember Marius as their champion during the dark days of the Social War. Constitutional procedure has been followed. Legal authority has been transferred. Sulla's command is ended before it begins. His dreams of Eastern riches dissolved by democratic vote. But Sulla is not a man to accept defeat gracefully. In his camp outside Rome, where legions wait for the order to march east, the consul makes a decision that will echo through the remaining decades of the Republic. He will not surrender his command. He will not bow to popular assemblies. He will not accept that his destiny can be determined by the votes of Italian farmers and shopkeepers. The speech he gives to his assembled officers is recorded by historians, though its exact words remain disputed. Some say he spoke of honor, of duty to the Republic, of the need to resist demagogues who would overturn established law. Others claim he was more direct, promising his soldiers the plunder of eastern cities and the glory that comes from following a victorious general. All sources agree on one crucial point. When Sulla finishes speaking, his legions remain loyal to him rather than to the state that commissioned them. This is the moment when the Roman Republic begins to die, though none present understand the magnitude of what they witness. For the first time in Roman history, a general turns his legions against Rome herself. Not against enemies of Rome, not against rebels or barbarians, but against the city whose eagles they carry, whose law they are sworn to uphold, whose authority gives meaning to their existence. The march on Rome begins at dawn on a day that historians will mark as the end of the Republic's innocence. Sulla's legions, 6 in number and seasoned by years of campaigning, move south along the Via Appia with the mechanical precision that has made Roman armies masters of the world. Their standards gleam in the morning sun, eagles of silver and gold that have witnessed victories from Britain to Africa, symbols of Rome's eternal power now turned against Rome herself. News of the approaching army reaches the city before Sulla's advance guard comes within sight of the walls. Panic spreads through the streets like wildfire as citizens struggle to comprehend the impossible. Roman legions are marching on Rome. Roman eagles fly against Roman eagles. The unthinkable has become reality. In the Forum, emergency sessions of the Senate convene while crowds gather to hear the latest reports. Some senators call for negotiation, hoping that reason might yet prevail over ambition. Others demand immediate military resistance, arguing that yielding to Sulla's armed demands would set a precedent that would destroy the Republic. Most simply stand in stunned silence, unable to believe that constitutional government could collapse so quickly. Marius, despite his age and failing health, attempts to organize the city's defense. He calls upon his veterans, men who served under his eagles in Africa and Germania, to take up arms once more in defense of Roman liberty. Some respond to his summons, motivated by personal loyalty or genuine patriotism. But many hesitate, unwilling to fight fellow Romans in what increasingly appears to be a conflict between rival strongmen rather than a principled defense of law. The few cohorts that gather to defend the city are hastily organized and poorly equipped. These are not professional soldiers but urban militia, shopkeepers and craftsmen who have never faced disciplined legions in battle. They lack the training, the equipment, and perhaps most crucially, the morale necessary to stand against Sulla's veterans. When the first clashes occur at the city's gates, the defenders scatter like leaves before a winter storm. Sulla's entry into Rome is almost anticlimactic. There are no great battles, no heroic last stands, no dramatic confrontations that poets might celebrate in future verses. The city simply surrenders to armed power, its resistance crumbling at the first application of serious force. Citizens who had debated the constitutional niceties of command transfers find themselves hiding in their homes while foreign soldiers, for that is what Roman legions become when they march against Rome, patrol streets that have known peace for centuries. The constitutional implications of Sulla's victory are staggering. For the first time in Roman history, military force has directly overturned civilian authority. The popular assembly's decision to transfer the Eastern Command has been reversed not through legal appeal or political maneuvering, but through the simple application of violence. The precedent is clear. In Rome, power belongs to whoever commands the most loyal legions. But Sulla is too clever to openly destroy the Republic's forms while establishing his personal dominance. He calls the Senate into session, addresses them with elaborate courtesy, speaks respectfully of law and tradition. His soldiers remain outside the meeting hall, but their presence is felt by every senator who speaks. The votes that confirm Sulla's restoration to the Eastern Command are unanimous, the unanimity of men who understand that dissent might prove fatal. More ominously, Sulla begins to settle scores with his political enemies. Sulpicius Rufus, the tribune whose legislation triggered the crisis, is declared a public enemy. His property is confiscated, his supporters scattered, his head displayed in the forum as a warning to future demagogues. Other opponents suffer similar fates, their deaths clothed in legal language but motivated by personal vengeance. This is Rome's introduction to the politics of fear, where opposition to powerful men becomes a capital crime. The proscription lists, those carefully compiled catalogues of enemies whose murders are officially sanctioned, do not yet exist, but their conceptual foundation is laid in these first executions of Roman citizens by Roman authority for purely political crimes. Marius, the great general who saved Rome from barbarian invasion, flees the city in disguise. The man who was once hailed as the third founder of Rome skulks through back alleys and servants' quarters, dependent on the loyalty of slaves and freedmen for his very survival. His escape marks the completion of a revolution that few recognize as such, the replacement of constitutional government with military despotism. Sulla's departure for the East leaves Rome superficially restored to normal governance. The consuls for the following year take office with traditional ceremony. The Senate meets in its accustomed halls. The law courts function according to established precedent. But beneath this facade of normalcy, fundamental changes have occurred that will shape everything that follows. Most significantly, the bond between legions and state has been severed. Sulla's soldiers followed him against Rome not from constitutional duty but from personal loyalty and the promise of reward. This precedent will not be forgotten by future generals who find themselves at odds with civilian authority. The lesson is clear. Roman armies serve those who pay them and lead them to victory, not abstract concepts of law or state. In the East, Sulla's campaigns against Mithridates unfold with the methodical brutality that characterizes all his endeavors. The siege of Athens, that ancient cradle of philosophy and democracy, becomes a laboratory for testing new approaches to urban warfare. When the city finally falls after months of starvation and bombardment, Sulla's treatment of the population demonstrates the evolution of his character from ambitious politician to something approaching pure predator. The sack of Athens is thorough and systematic. Libraries that have preserved Greek learning for centuries go up in flames. Temples that have stood since the age of Pericles are stripped of their treasures. Citizens who have claimed descent from Solon and Cleisthenes are sold into slavery or executed for the crime of resisting Roman authority. The city that gave the world the concept of democracy dies screaming under Roman swords. But even as Sulla wins victories in the East, events in Rome spiral beyond anyone's control. Marius returns from exile, supported by a collection of desperate men who have nothing left to lose. His coup succeeds not through superior force but through the chaos and confusion that follow Sulla's departure. The government left behind by the absent consul lacks both authority and legitimacy. It cannot claim popular support, having been imposed by military force, nor can it claim constitutional validity, having been established through armed rebellion. The civil war that engulfs Rome in Sulla's absence is unlike anything the Republic has previously experienced. This is not a conflict between Rome and her enemies, but between different factions of Romans, each claiming to represent legitimate authority. Marius and his supporters purge their enemies with systematic efficiency, compiling lists of opponents whose deaths are deemed necessary for public order. These early proscription lists establish methods that will later be perfected under Sulla's more systematic approach. Names are posted in public places, identifying citizens whose murder will be rewarded rather than punished. Property confiscation accompanies execution, creating financial incentives for political violence. Family members of proscribed individuals face exile or death, ensuring that revenge cannot be inherited across generations. The 7 hills of Rome, which have witnessed triumph and tragedy for 7 centuries, now echo with sounds that would have horrified earlier generations. Citizens hunt citizens through streets that once knew only the footsteps of foreign ambassadors seeking Roman favor. The Forum, where Cicero will one day deliver his greatest orations, runs red with Roman blood spilled by Roman hands. The temples where citizens have prayed for the Republic's welfare become refuges for men fleeing death sentences pronounced by fellow Romans. Marius himself dies during this period of chaos. Whether from natural causes or political violence remains unclear. His death removes one source of factional conflict but resolves none of the underlying issues that have torn the Republic apart. Power passes to his political heir, Lucius Cornelius Cinna, a man whose name will become synonymous with arbitrary rule and the breakdown of legal government. Cinna's dominance of Rome demonstrates how completely the traditional system has collapsed. He serves as consul for 3 consecutive years, maintaining power not through constitutional legitimacy, but through control of armed force and systematic elimination of opponents. His government exists in a state of perpetual emergency, justifying increasingly extreme measures as temporary necessities that somehow never become unnecessary. Reports of these events reach Sulla in his eastern campaigns, carried by refugees who flee Rome's chaos for the relative safety of military camps. The general's response is predictable. He accelerates his campaigns against Mithridates, seeking to conclude eastern affairs quickly so that he can return to settle Roman problems with Roman methods. The peace treaty that ends the Mithridatic War is harsh but practical. Mithridates retains his throne but surrenders all territories west of the Euphrates. He pays massive indemnities that will fund Sulla's future operations while providing adequate compensation for Roman losses. Most importantly, he agrees to remain neutral in future conflicts between Roman factions, a provision that recognizes the new reality of Roman politics as an ongoing civil war between rival strongmen. Sulla's return to Italy in 83 BCE brings with him legions enriched by eastern plunder and hardened by years of continuous campaigning. These are not the same soldiers who followed him against Rome 5 years earlier. They have become a professional army in the truest sense, loyal to their commander above all other considerations, dependent on his success for their own advancement, indifferent to the political niceties that once constrained Roman military action. The landing at Brundisium marks the beginning of the end for the Republic as Romans have known it. Sulla's army faces opposition from forces loyal to the government in Rome, but these battles are essentially meaningless. The real war was 1 year earlier when Romans first accepted that political disputes could be settled through military force. Everything that follows is simply working out the logical consequences of that acceptance. The campaigns that bring Sulla back to power are swift and decisive. Opposition melts away as commanders and soldiers realize that the future belongs to the general who has demonstrated superior competence in both military and political spheres. Young Pompey, barely past his 20th birthday, raises legions from his family's estates to support Sulla's cause. Marcus Crassus, seeking to rebuild fortunes lost during the Marian persecutions, brings his own forces to Sulla's standard. These alliances are pragmatic rather than ideological. Neither Pompey nor Crassus cares particularly about constitutional theory or the proper relationship between civilian and military authority. They support Sulla because he appears likely to win, and in the new Rome that is emerging from the wreckage of the old, winning is the only virtue that matters. The final battle occurs at the Colline Gate, within sight of Rome's walls. Sulla's veterans face the last organized resistance to his return, a desperate coalition of Marian supporters and Samnite allies who understand that defeat means not just political submission but likely extinction. The fighting is savage and prolonged, with neither side offering quarter and both understanding that compromise is no longer possible. Victory gives Sulla unchallenged mastery of the Roman world. But unlike his earlier coup, this triumph is followed not by modest political adjustments but by systematic reconstruction of the entire governmental system. Sulla understands that the Republic's institutions have proven inadequate to contain the forces that modern Rome has unleashed. Something new must be built from the ruins of the old. The dictatorship that Sulla assumes is unprecedented in both scope and duration. Earlier Roman dictators had been appointed for specific emergencies and limited time periods. Sulla's authority is unlimited in scope and indefinite in duration. He will retain power until he chooses to surrender it, answerable to no institution and constrained by no law beyond his own judgment. But it is the proscription lists that make Sulla's dictatorship truly revolutionary. These are not the hasty executions that characterized earlier political purges, but systematic catalogues of enemies whose deaths are officially mandated by state authority. The lists are posted in the forum with the kind of bureaucratic precision that Romans normally reserve for tax assessments or census records. The mechanics of proscription reveal the transformation of Roman governance from law-based to arbitrary. Citizens wake to discover their names posted in public places, marking them for death without trial, appeal, or explanation. Their property is automatically forfeited to the state, creating financial incentives for their elimination. Their children are barred from public office, ensuring that opposition cannot be inherited. Their very memory is condemned, with inscriptions recording their achievements ordered destroyed throughout the empire. The psychological impact of the proscription lists extends far beyond their immediate victims. Every Roman citizen must now calculate the political implications of their every action, knowing that today's ally might become tomorrow's enemy, and that yesterday's loyalty provides no protection against current suspicion. The easy confidence that had characterized Roman public life for centuries evaporates in the face of arbitrary power exercised without constraint. Yet Sulla's systematic brutality serves a purpose beyond mere vengeance. By eliminating entire families of opponents, he seeks to prevent the kinds of hereditary feuds that have plagued Roman politics for generations. By confiscating vast properties, he acquires resources necessary to reward supporters and fund future operations. By demonstrating the consequences of opposition, he hopes to discourage future resistance to his authority. The numbers vary depending on the source, but historians generally agree that Sulla's proscriptions claim between 4,000 and 5,000 lives, an enormous toll by earlier Roman standards, though modest compared to the slaughters that will characterize later civil wars. More significant than the raw numbers is the systematic nature of the killing and the legal framework that makes mass murder not just permissible but officially mandated. Sulla's constitutional reforms attempt to prevent future civil wars by strengthening traditional institutions while eliminating the democratic elements that have proven destabilizing. The Senate's authority is expanded and protected. The powers of tribunes are curtailed. The career ladder that leads to high office is regulated to prevent rapid advancement by ambitious politicians. Popular assemblies lose much of their legislative authority. These reforms demonstrate Sulla's genuine belief that the republic can be saved through proper institutional design. He is not merely a warlord seeking personal aggrandizement, but a conservative revolutionary who hopes to restore stability by eliminating the democratic excesses that have led to chaos. His vision of Rome is aristocratic and hierarchical, but it is also orderly and lawful within its own terms. The most surprising aspect of Sulla's dictatorship is its voluntary termination. In 79 BCE, after serving as dictator for 2 years and consul for 1 additional year, Sulla simply retires from public life. He surrenders his extraordinary powers, dismisses his bodyguards, and withdraws to private estates in Campania, where he pursues the pleasures of literature and philosophy. This retirement baffles both contemporaries and historians. Men who achieve absolute power rarely surrender it voluntarily, particularly when they face likely retaliation from surviving enemies. Sulla's decision to step down suggests either supreme confidence in his reforms or exhaustion with the burdens of unlimited authority. Perhaps he recognizes that his work is complete, the republic he inherited is dead, and the system he has created will survive only as long as his successors choose to maintain it. Sulla's death in 78 BCE removes the last restraint on the forces he has unleashed. His funeral is a magnificent affair, befitting a man who has reshaped the Roman world through force of will and strategic intelligence. But the eulogies that praise his achievements cannot disguise the reality that his legacy is chaos. The republic he tried to save through systematic violence has been replaced by something that retains republican forms while operating according to entirely different principles. The most important of those principles is the supremacy of military power over civilian authority. Sulla has demonstrated that in Rome, constitutional niceties matter less than loyal legions. Future politicians will remember this lesson and act accordingly. The Republic's remaining decades will be dominated by generals who understand that real power comes from successful command rather than electoral success. Sulla's career establishes the template that future strongmen will follow. Build military reputation through foreign conquest, use that reputation to gain political advancement, employ political position to secure profitable commands, convert military success into overwhelming power, eliminate opponents through systematic violence, rule through fear while maintaining constitutional facades. It is a pattern that will be repeated with variations by Pompey, Caesar, Mark Antony, and ultimately Octavian. But perhaps Sulla's most lasting contribution to Roman political culture is the normalization of extreme violence as a tool of governance. Before Sulla, Romans might accept that civil conflicts would involve some bloodshed, but they could not imagine systematic murder as official policy. After Sulla, proscription lists become a standard feature of political transition, while mass execution is considered merely another administrative function. The Republic dies not with Sulla's dictatorship but with Roman acceptance of Sullan methods as legitimate governance. When citizens agree that some of their fellow citizens deserve death for political opposition, when property confiscation becomes standard punishment for ideological disagreement, when systematic terror is employed to maintain order, when all of this becomes normal rather than shocking, then Republican government becomes impossible regardless of constitutional forms. In the wind through the 7 hills, you can hear the echoes of names being read from prescription lists, the sound of bronze tablets being posted in the forum, the cries of citizens who discover that their loyalty to the Republic has been repaid with death sentences. Sulla gave Rome order, but the price of that order was the soul of the civilization that had made Rome great. The Republic would linger for another 40 years, electing consuls and convening Senate, maintaining the elaborate ceremonies that had once meant something. But it would never again be what it was before Sulla marched his legions through the city gates and taught Romans that power belongs to those strong enough to seize it and ruthless enough to keep it. Sleep now, and dream of marble halls where law once mattered more than force, where citizens could oppose their government without fearing for their lives, where the Republic meant something more than whoever commanded the most loyal soldiers. Tomorrow will bring new strongmen with new armies, new prescription lists with new victims, new betrayals of the trust that makes civilized government possible. But tonight, in the gathering darkness, let there be peace. Part 3, Pompey, Crassus, and Spartacus, 70s BCE. The decade following Sulla's death resembles nothing so much as a theatrical intermission between the acts of a great tragedy. The Republic's forms continue, like actors maintaining their roles after the audience has departed. Consuls are elected, laws are passed, justice is administered, all with the elaborate precision of a ritual whose meaning has been forgotten, but whose performance must continue. Yet beneath this facade of normalcy, the forces that will destroy the Republic gather strength like storm clouds on a distant horizon. 3 names will dominate this interlude between Sulla's dictatorship and Caesar's wars. Pompey the Great, whose military genius masks a fundamental inability to understand politics. Marcus Crassus, whose vast wealth cannot purchase the respect he craves. And Spartacus, a gladiator whose rebellion will reveal the fragility of Roman power even at its height. Their stories interweave like threads in a tapestry whose pattern becomes clear only when viewed from the perspective of history. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, stands at the apex of Roman society while still in his 20s, a phenomenon that would have been impossible in the Republic's earlier centuries. Traditional Roman career progression demanded decades of gradual advancement through established offices, each step earned through patient service and demonstrated competence. But Sulla's revolution has shattered these conventions, creating opportunities for extraordinary individuals to achieve extraordinary power through extraordinary means. Pompey's rise begins with a kind of political mathematics that would have horrified earlier generations. At age 23, without having held any official position, he raises 3 legions from his family's vast estates in Picenum. These are not militia called up for emergency service, but professional soldiers equipped at private expense and loyal to their commander rather than the state. The precedent is ominous. private armies created by wealthy individuals for personal advancement rather than public service. His early campaigns in Sicily and Africa demonstrate the military competence that will make his reputation, but also reveal character traits that will ultimately doom him. Pompey possesses genuine tactical brilliance, an intuitive understanding of logistics, and the rare ability to inspire fierce loyalty among his soldiers. But he lacks the political instincts that Roman success requires, the subtle understanding of how power operates when it cannot be expressed through direct command. The Senate's decision to grant Pompey triumphal honors for victories won while holding no official position represents a complete abandonment of constitutional precedent. Triumphs are reserved for magistrates who command armies by legal authority. Pompey commands armies by personal authority and receives triumph anyway. The precedent establishes that in the new Rome, success matters more than legality, achievement more than process. But Pompey's greatest early triumph comes not from foreign conquest but from domestic crisis. Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, one of Sulla's former lieutenants, attempts to overturn the dictator's settlement through armed rebellion. His motivations are complex, part genuine outrage at Sullan brutality, part personal ambition, part recognition that in post-Sullan Rome, only military force can effect political change. Lepidus's rebellion fails not because Romans reject his goals, but because they fear renewed civil war more than they hate Sullan institutions. The trauma of the recent conflicts has created a public hunger for stability that overrides desires for justice or constitutional restoration. Romans are willing to accept almost any government that promises peace, even if that government operates through methods they would have rejected as tyrannical in earlier generations. Pompey's suppression of Lepidus's rebellion establishes his reputation as the Republic's defender, but the methods he employs reveal how thoroughly Roman political culture has been corrupted. There are no trials for captured rebels, no attempts to understand their grievances, no efforts to address the underlying issues that motivated their uprising. There is only systematic elimination of opposition through the efficient application of violence. The young general's treatment of captured enemies demonstrates the degree to which Sullan methods have become normalized. Executions are carried out with bureaucratic precision. Property confiscations follow established procedures. Families of rebels face exile or worse, ensuring that opposition cannot regenerate through kinship networks. The brutality is systematic rather than passionate, administrative rather than personal, which somehow makes it more terrifying than traditional warfare's emotional violence. Meanwhile, in the East, a different kind of crisis develops that will provide Pompey with opportunities for even greater glory. Sertorius, one of Marius's former generals, has established an independent government in Spain that operates as a republic in exile. His regime attracts Romans who refuse to accept Sullan legitimacy, creating an alternative center of power that threatens the new settlement's stability. Sertorius is a formidable opponent whose career illustrates both the Republic's decline and its residual strengths. He possesses military talents that rival Pompey's own, administrative skills that enable him to govern diverse populations effectively, and political vision that transcends narrow factional interests. His Spanish government operates according to republican principles that Rome herself has abandoned, creating the ironic situation where Roman exiles preserve Roman values better than Romans themselves. The Sertorian War, as historians will name this conflict, becomes a laboratory for testing new forms of warfare adapted to the realities of civil conflict. Traditional Roman military doctrine assumes enemies who are clearly foreign, whose defeat serves obvious Roman interests, whose resistance can be overcome through superior organization and discipline. But Sertorius commands Romans fighting other Romans for competing visions of what Rome should become. Pompey's Spanish campaigns stretch across years of brutal mountain warfare that provides no clear victories and few obvious heroes. This is not the kind of war that Roman poets celebrate in epic verse. There are no great battles where virtue triumphs over barbarism, no moments of individual heroism that validate Roman superiority. Instead, there is grinding attritional conflict where success is measured in villages burned and opponents eliminated rather than territories conquered and people civilized. The war's most disturbing aspect is not its duration or cost, but the degree to which it normalizes violence between Romans as a tool of political discourse. Prisoners are not exchanged according to traditional military courtesy but executed as traitors to legitimate authority. Civilian populations are not protected according to established conventions but targeted as potential supporters of enemy regimes. The boundaries between war and politics, between foreign and domestic enemies, become increasingly meaningless. While Pompey struggles in Spanish mountains, Rome faces a different kind of crisis that will ultimately prove even more significant for the Republic's future. In the gladiatorial schools of Capua, where slaves are trained to die for Roman entertainment, a Thracian named Spartacus begins planning an escape that will become the largest slave rebellion in Roman history. Spartacus represents everything that Romans fear most about their own success. He is not a barbarian who can be dismissed as naturally inferior, but a former soldier who understands Roman military methods. He is not driven by simple desperation, but by a sophisticated understanding of Roman weaknesses and contradictions. Most dangerously, he commands not just individual loyalty but the kind of mass following that can transform isolated incidents into systematic rebellion. The initial escape from Capua involves fewer than 100 gladiators, a number so small that Roman authorities barely notice their disappearance. Runaway slaves are a persistent problem in Roman society, but one that local militias and private security forces can normally handle without involving regular legions. The assumption is that desperate men without military training or proper equipment cannot pose serious threats to established order. This assumption proves catastrophically wrong. Spartacus and his followers established themselves on Mount Vesuvius, using the mountain's natural defenses to create a secure base while recruiting additional supporters from the surrounding countryside. Their numbers grow with frightening speed as word spreads throughout southern Italy that successful resistance to Roman authority is possible. The rebellion's appeal extends far beyond the gladiatorial schools that provided its initial membership. Agricultural slaves from vast latifundia see opportunities for freedom that normal legal processes will never provide. Urban slaves in Roman households recognize that their comfortable servitude depends entirely on their master's continued goodwill. Free peasants driven from their land by economic forces beyond their control understand that their situation differs from slavery mainly in name. Most disturbing to Roman sensibilities, the rebellion attracts support from Romans themselves, citizens whose economic circumstances have become so desperate that foreign leadership seems preferable to domestic government. These are men who have served in Roman legions, who understand Roman tactics, who possess the military experience necessary to transform a mob of escapees into an effective fighting force. The Roman response to Spartacus's early successes reveals how completely the Republic's military has adapted to the assumption that serious enemies exist only beyond Roman borders. The forces initially sent against the rebels consist mainly of urban militia and local levies, formations adequate for maintaining order against civilian unrest but hopelessly outmatched by experienced warriors fighting for their lives. The first Roman defeat occurs near Mount Vesuvius when a hastily assembled force under Praetor Gaius Claudius Glaber attempts to besiege the rebel stronghold. Spartacus demonstrates tactical sophistication that amazes contemporary observers by outflanking Roman positions through routes that military manuals declare impassable. The rebels descend from the mountain like an avalanche, destroying organized resistance and capturing equipment that transforms them from desperate fugitives into a genuine army. News of this victory spreads throughout Italy with the speed that only truly shocking events achieve. Slave revolts are not unprecedented in Roman history, but successful slave revolts that defeat regular Roman forces in open battle challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of Roman power. If slaves can defeat Romans, if the lowest members of society can overcome their social superiors through military action, then what does Roman superiority actually mean? The psychological impact of Spartacus's early victories extends far beyond their immediate military significance. Throughout the empire, slave populations begin to whisper of possibilities that previous generations never dared imagine. Free populations start to wonder whether Roman power is as absolute as they have been taught to believe. Even Roman citizens begin to question whether the system that has brought them prosperity and security is as stable as they assumed. Spartacus understands that his rebellion's long-term success depends on more than military victories. He must create alternative institutions that can provide the kind of order and security that Roman government offers its subjects. His confederacy develops administrative structures that coordinate activities across hundreds of miles, establish supply systems that keep armies fed and equipped, and maintain communication networks that enable rapid response to changing circumstances. The rebel government operates according to principles that expose the contradictions in Roman claims to represent civilization and justice. Leadership positions are earned through demonstrated competence rather than inherited status. Military commands are awarded based on tactical skill rather than political connections. Resources are distributed according to contribution to common efforts rather than accident of birth. These organizational innovations prove as dangerous to Roman authority as rebel military successes. Spartacus demonstrates that effective government does not require the elaborate hierarchies that Romans consider essential to civilized life. His confederacy functions without senators or consuls, without complicated legal procedures or inherited privileges, yet provides the order and security that government exists to deliver. As the rebellion grows in strength and sophistication, Roman responses become increasingly desperate and brutal. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, receives command of the war effort with authorization to employ whatever methods prove necessary for victory. His appointment represents a fundamental shift in Roman approach, from treating the rebellion as a law enforcement problem to recognizing it as a military threat requiring military solutions. Crassus brings to the anti-Spartacus campaign the same systematic efficiency that has made him Rome's richest citizen. He understands that defeating the rebels requires not just superior force but superior organization, better intelligence, more reliable supply lines, and more disciplined troops. Most importantly, he recognizes that this is not a conventional war where victory means occupying enemy territory, but a counterinsurgency where success means eliminating enemy capacity for continued resistance.